No, I haven't partied hard since last night in Rome. It's not broken. That's about all we can say right now. It's not broken. She's not supposed to move it for the next 3 days. Thank you for asking. But she's in a lot of pain still. And so she fell off a bike. One of those city bikes, the seat was goofy and she fell off. No, because she could have taken another one of the bikes. She took the bike with her. It wasn't like the last bike left, right? And I think she knew it was broken, but decided to go with it anyway. And so, look, I'm recording now, so we won't talk about it. Parents pending losses with the city. Right. I'm not going. Okay, so we were looking at archaic Greek art, remember? And, we, prior to the trip, we don't only look at archaic Greek art, but that's the first of 3 periods of Greek art, as you now well know, right? Archaic is the earliest period that goes from the period when Greek civilization was first getting going around the time of Homer, all the way to right around the middle of the 5th century, right around 450 or so, right? So it's the first of 3, and most of what we saw when we were over there was Hellenistic, which is the last of the 3 periods of Greek art. So we really were somewhat ill prepared to go to Rome, and that's one of the things I've learned from this. I want to do that kind of differently. Suffice to say, I want to get us through Hellenistic and into Roman art and eventually into the Middle Ages before we leave for the spring. So remember that what we saw when we looked at Greek archaic art was that in almost every venue, in almost every kind of art that we looked at, we saw through the course of the 500s BC, in other words, from 600 to 500, backwards, right? We saw art get increasingly realistic, where they understand anatomy better, the poses become more relaxed, the understanding of muscle groups work together became stronger, right, with their anatomical understanding. And with these 2 statues, the Kouros on your left and the Croesus on your right, you can see all of those things moving toward a more naturalistic, more realistic kind of art. Less of that sort of schematic, buggy-eyed look that the Kouros figure has, and something a little bit more realistic, although arguably equally buggy-eyed, just in a different way, with the Croesus figures. But if you look at the musculature in particular, you start to see that they're softer, rounder, looking more the way that a human body looks, and less like it's just sort of been scratched onto the surface of something else. Right? So that's something we see frequently as we look at Greek art in the archaic period. We also saw, as we looked at pottery from the archaic period, that we moved from the black figure, which is the earlier kind of archaic art, to eventually the red figure, which is the newer one. And as we move from black figure to red figure, we end up moving from, again, a more schematic kind of art, a less realistic kind of art, still pretty good, but less realistic kind of art, to something that's more realistic, more sophisticated, more complicated in the poses that they choose, right? So you guys all are familiar with the one on the left that you got to see in person, and we talked about it quite a bit in class. I think it was even on the exam. Right? So you've seen that one, you know that one. On the right, we have another black figure copy. We have to kind of go back and pick up. This is one of the ones for the Villa Julia, which I neglected to put on the schedule, right? And had at the same time assigned it to people. So Juliana and Regina were responsible for this part on the right. Is one of you involved in this, or the other, or both? Who's our resident expert on that spot? Oh, really? Was that the one I put up online? Wasn't this one?
I think it was the one I think I just read it when I was
okay. Okay, but still, you were able to then at least begin to talk about who Dionysus, what are these things about Dionysus and Minos? What's going on with that?
Well, he's the god of air and wine.
Okay.
And the Minos are the father.
Can you guys all hear Juliana okay?
I think she does well.
Me maybe Juliana, or at least, or stand up over here by the light. Okay.
Yes, of the various female dollars, and they're often depicted intricately with their dresses and holding grapefruit. And in the one that I was, one was carrying the hair, and the other one was carrying the beard, well, part of the beard.
Okay.
And they have, I agree.
So say that again. They have a what?
They have ivy.
Oh, ivy crown. Okay.
And understand the great things that make borders and tops and bottoms and God one. There's a lot of great things.
Excellent. Did they live with him on his island?
Yeah, they're all in the followers.
Okay. So we talked about Ariadne coming back from helping Theseus defeat the Minotaur, right? And how Theseus dumps her on an island where Dionysus lives. But these people live there as well, these Maenads. And they're all women, is that right?
Yeah,
exclusively women, right? So did you all get, he's the god of theater and wine. We usually talk about him as the god of wine. Theater and wine. And the Maenads are some of his followers. He has quite a few followers, right? They're usually people who get drunk a lot, right? Well, I think when you're a god, you don't get drunk. You know what I mean? That's the beauty of being a god of wine. You can drink as much as you want. It doesn't really hit you. But all the people that follow him are people that really want what he has to give, which is wine. And that's why, as Juliana said, the Maenads are often holding grapes and standing on grape wreaths under their feet as well, to indicate that they're sort of into Dionysus for what he has to offer them, right? But you also mentioned that they sometimes hold game, right? Hare, rabbit, right? And deer as well, right? Now, most of Dionysus' chums are woodland creatures, if you will. It makes it sound like a Saturday morning cartoon. Dionysus is woodland things. But they live out in the woods, and they're often people who are, or characters who are part human and part animal as well. So we get satyrs, for example, which are figures that are part goat, have a body of a goat or legs of a goat, and a torso of a human, right? And we saw a satyr, right, when we were in Rome. We saw the tail coming off the back of him, right? We saw the old satyr and the young satyr, right? 3 or 4 different statues that we saw when we were there. So they fall into the same camp, the same group of people that follow Dionysus for one reason or another. Right? In this particular image, there's a nice close-up. Our Maenad that is on the left, and Dionysus appears on the right. Did you look into different ways that Dionysus appears? This is a tough question. So the answer, no is a fine answer. Different guises, right? For example, in this case, he's got a very, very long beard. But he doesn't always have a very long beard.
I read that
Okay, and that's probably to be expected because you've seen most men are always depicted darker than women anyway, right? In the first place. I don't know the answer to it. That's why I think it's kind of I'm hoping you can fill me in for the future. Because I know that Dionysus in imagery has particular guises that he appears in. I think guides a role. And sometimes he appears as an older figure with a beard, and other times as a younger figure, clean shaven, right? Beards are always used to signify age. I doubt it, because he's a god of theater, and he doesn't really perform in the theater in the same way, as far as I know. So I don't know if that's a really good point, Margaret, because since everything that artists include in the imagery have an impact on the meaning of the piece, the question of whether he's bearded or beardless, there should be something to be taken into consideration. I don't have the answers for it, right? But it's something that we should just think about as we're looking at these things. And all of this stuff carries meaning. Here they're recumbent on a Greek-style bed, couch, if you will, right? So they're in the midst of a banquet. This is a typical banqueting scene to kick back like this. Dionysus leaning on his elbow on the right, the Maenad leaning at his feet. You'll notice that unlike Ichabodius' plot, the handling of the details of the drapery is really quite simplified. it's lovely and it's decorative with those broad sweeps, but it has none of that sort of intricate, tiny detail that we had seen when we looked at Ezekiel. There were little star patterns and things that appeared, or even the faces that were carved into their shin guards and whatnot. But here, it's really kind of schematized. And can you tell what that is that you've got in your hand here? A horn, right? Have you ever seen what these horns are used for? Exactly. Or it's often used also as a metaphor for the bounty of the earth, right? Have you ever heard the word cornucopia? That's exactly, cornucopia, what that means in Greek is the horn of plenty, right? A horn full of everything, right? And so in this case, I think it has a dual reference. It has a reference to the idea of her as a wine drinker. Look at it, right? But also that double reference of Dionysus is the one who provides everything. We saw a horn of plenty very similar to this one on the lap of the figure on the Arapaches. When we walked around the back of the Arapaches, the uphill side, you remember the altar that was inside the building, right? We walked on the back side, and there was the figure of Rome seated, and there was the figure of another figure seated with wind and sea animals and kids nursing a child, and she has in her lap a cornucopia, right? And because she was Mother Earth, that made sense there. So here, sort of a dual reference to, because Dionysus has connections, obviously, to nature as God is one. And you can see that around the outside of them, in this rather simplified decoration, are these vine tendrils that also relate to this burgeoning nature itself, right? So the hare and the deer that you mentioned, that Maenads often are seen carrying, are indeed references not only to Dionysus' life in the wild. And wine, makes you do wild, crazy, stupid things. Like put cheese on your nose for 5 points. Something like that, right? Yeah. Then we're going to notice that I didn't do it. I don't need that takes 5 points off of everybody. But, wine makes you do things that are not logical, that are closer to the irrational that animals are, and not the rationality that humans have. I had Lena first do it. Which is? I think it might be the covering of it. I'm not 100% sure what the things on the bottom are. You'll notice that in other places, over here, for example, and underneath on the right, you see these sort of aquatic flower forms there, right, that are filling up the negative space. And I think this particular artist, called the Red Line Painter. There's a lot of painters that this goes back to sort of what we as historians do, is that we look out and we see, these pots all look like they were painted by the same person, but none of them are named, right? But they seem to be a fairly cohesive group. And then there'll be some other ones that are kind of close but not nearly as good, right? So what a historian would do, an art historian would do, would be to group those pots and see if they could find some documentary evidence that would help you with any one of them found. Right? Or B, if not, then how can we characterize that group? How can we call that artist by a name that makes sense? In this case, it's the Red Line Painter, because around the rim of many of the pots, there's over the top of the black, instead of scratching through the red, they painted the red. Right? So, the Red Line Painter, okay, became this sort of shorthand for, shorthand for what their name is, right? The Red Line Painter. And this one is, I treated it by the people at the Villa Julia as the circle of the Red Line Painter. And all of this is because, for the longest time, art historians worked for dealers. And if you can put a name on a pot painter, the pot's worth more money, even if that name is something stupid like Circle of the Red Line Painter, right? So there's this attempt to try to get an author for these things, right? That makes it more valuable. I don't really care, about adding a name to these or not, right? So anyway, this is the Circle of the Red Line Painter, named after some of the pots from the group that have red lines painted over the top of the line. Right? Thank you, Joe. We have a redline painter base up in the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and here you can, not Philadelphia, sorry, Baltimore, because I'm in mind, the Walton Art Museum. And you can see some of the forms that are very, very similar in the decorations. Look at the flowers that appear on the neck of the pot, right? Those floral forms that decorate the negative spaces, the empty spaces around the primary figures, right? The way the drapery is handled with these broad, sweeping arcs, quite simplified. All of these things are very, very similar. So this gives us a sense of what, how our historians have put this group of pots together. You'll even notice these little fleckies in here, right? That fleckies is, by the way, the official term for this. Fleckies. It's spelled with a Q. That makes it fancy. I'm kidding. But you can see how much of the decorations is that very, very similar to the two of them, even though the scene that's chosen is another Dionysus scene. But here with a bacchante. A bacchante is somebody who's celebrating what we call a bacchanal. A bacchanal is a drunken orgy, right? Maybe without the sex, but just a drunken festival. Right? And the reason we call it a bacchanal is because Dionysus, when he is adopted by the Romans, his name is changed to what, Bacchus, right? So a Bacchus party is a bacchanal, right? And so a bacchante is someone who celebrates with Bacchus at one of these wine-laced parties, right? But in both of them, we see him accompanied by his drinking buddies, which is not uncommon, right? I realize we have quite a few black figure pots to get through at one point or another. So also from the Villa Julia, in this earlier archaic style, is Hercules and the Hydra of Lerna and Fora. And this was Margaret and Vanessa. Margaret, you have a book open. Excellent. So can you speak loud enough that people can hear?
Sure. Can you guys hear me? Yes. Okay, great.
Because you can sit up here too. Do you want the seat of honor? I can sit over here like a student.
Okay, so we learned about Hercules in class, right, guys? Yeah. So, do you guys remember the 12 labors and all that stuff that he had to do? It was really annoying, dragged out. You guys remember that? Yeah. Okay, well, this is one of them. Well, not really, technically, but it's part of the process, if that makes any sense. So, he was instructed to slay the Lemurian creature, the serpent, and he had a really hard time doing it, and he got his nephew to help him out, right? And there was some way that they finally were able to defeat him. It was they had to cut off each head, and there's 9 heads, like a crab looking thing. Anyway, so they cut off each head, and then they had to torch the neck after they chopped off all the heads off, right? So that's how they finally did it. But because he got help from his nephew, who is Iolaus. Yeah. Iolaus. Okay. I thought so. So yes, because he got help from his nephew Iolaus, it wasn't considered part of the 12 labors, and I think he actually ended up doing something else. So that kind of sucked. But yeah, this is one of the harder ones. It's black figure, as you can tell. Again, same type of what was the word you used for them? They're waterflowers. Okay, yeah. So same type of thing. These little, there's these tiny details, but it's not as intricate as we've seen before, and other one that I got there was, you can see it's same. It's kind of, it's there and it's pretty, but it's not as detail oriented as that one. Yeah, any questions?
So why did they have to cauterize the neck after they cut off?
I think because it was regrowing.
That's exactly right. If you cut off one of the heads,
It kept on regrowing. That was the problem.
and in some versions, when you cut off one head,
Two more grow back.
right?
Yeah.
So if you start off with a presentation head, you wrap one up onto the nine head. You cut one up and you 10 heads, right?
So that's why he had to have his like nephew help him out, and
Right.
that's why it wasn't counted because he had help. But yeah, this is one of his like problems.
So that Harrison is on the right. Is that correct? And the nephew's on the left?
Yes. Because he's got the
flame, right?
Yeah.
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 And you'll notice that the style of these is kind of similar to the Apex flame's eyes, right? See their eyes through the one on the right. Right. Holding the neck. And when the club, you see the club is on fire.
Yeah.
So that's the nephew that he had to call in to immediately cauterize the wound. So that's when he went back to 2 instead of 1, right? And that's why the God said you cheat.
Yeah.
Right?
Because
You got to go through another thing because you're supposed to do this. Right?
Yeah.
So, but if you look at the style of the confusion, this one is taken into a case that's called the Michigan function, right? Probably, I don't know this. You know why?
I don't. I actually couldn't. It was hard to find information on this.
Yeah, my guess is that there's probably a really famous, and maybe the best of the group caught.
Yeah.
That's in Ann Arbor. That's
Yeah.
University of Michigan. That's my guess.
Probably.
You know, some of our larger universities are. And they're usually named, when they have place names, they're named for a particular topic, the best example. Do you remember when we looked at the vestibular by face of Orpheus? Not Orpheus. Oedipus and the Sphinx? Yeah. Right? It's called the Oedipus Sphinx after that pot because of the ones that have been grouped around it. That is considered the best example. Or sometimes it's so you'll notice if you look at the way the details of the body are handled inside the outline, look at the muscles on Heracles and Iolas, right? It's very different from the way the lines inside the contour are handled in Dionysus and the Mona. There's more attention to muscles, there's more attention to the details of anatomy, and it's not really as sort of simplified and macro. This is one of the things that a historian would look at, art historian would look at and say, this comes from this painter. Right? So there's no smoking gun, there's no hard evidence, simply what you can look at. Even though some things are the same, like the handling of those aquatic sea urchins and netting equipment, right?
I think like comparing between the two, like that one just kind of looks like almost rushed. Well, this one looks like they took their time a little bit, made it a little bit easier.
And that's a really good point, Barbara, because in many ways, you think about these pots and how they survive, they're all very valuable, right?
Yeah.
In fact, I looked up a red line painter pot, and one sold Sotheby's, I want to say 5 years ago, for $35,000.
Yeah.
So there was a good opportunity, regardless of who did this, okay? And,
where are you going with that?
I have no idea where I was going. I didn't just go on. Basically, in the day, right, people were buying these things as decorative, and just like anything else, you can buy IKEA furniture.
Exactly.
Or you can buy handmade furniture, real chairs and behind.
You go to Home Goods and get some cutesy stuff.
So some of these cars, I don't think rushed is the right word, but they're sort of,
Just doesn't look like it's fun. Yeah, exactly.
Equal higher price, right? And if you're very, very good at something like HDQ, you can charge that much more because everybody knows you're like the rock star of black finger pottery, right? So, you were raising your hand. Were you? I saw something at the corner of my eye. No? Okay. 510 to 500.
Sounds good.
Okay. Thank you, Margaret.
You're welcome. John, Margaret.
Oh, I think I had this. We could have been looking at this. Sorry about that. So yeah, there's the Hydra's head. And again, you'll notice the squiggles. This is dated somewhat later. They give us a range date all the way to the end of Black Figure pottery. And then part of that is because you'll notice that there's a really good attempt with this, less so than with our red line finger, to show things moving in three dimensions, coming toward us and looking behind it. It doesn't just exist on a flat plane this way, right? And the heads of that Hydra are quite clear in this. Okay. Now, as we saw, by the end of the 6th century, right, by 500 BC, we start to get a second style of Greek vase painting in the archaic period, which we call red figure, because the figures are red, right? And with this technique, where you're painting the background, you're painting the negative space rather than painting the figure, what we get are significantly more complicated poses, twisting and turning in space, and also a more solid understanding of human anatomy. Look at the proportions of the figures. They still have really, massive shoulders and hips and thighs. But even the figure here of Iolaus, you'll notice the hips are a bit low on the body, on the proportions of the body. Like the torso is kind of long by comparison. Right? Your waist is not halfway down your body. Your waist is more like a third of the way down your body. Right? Your thighs are about as long as your chest. And those are kind of strange looking, right? That way. And he's got a Kardashian as well, but here the muscles are much more detailed in Euphronius's veins, right? Significantly more detailed, and the poses are also significantly more sophisticated. So as they wrestle, Antaeus on your right his body is being wrenched by Hercules. And the body, as you can read it, comes forward. So through here there's the pectoral muscles, right? And then there's his six pack coming down here. There's his stuff. Yep. And his body then twists and turns his legs wrapped behind him. Well, here, his head's been wrenched around, right? So it's pose that can course you through space. Much more sophisticated than the simple pose. And that's something that we keep coming in as we look at red figure faces. Even this arm that's been bent by Hercules laying shows us this greater fascination with the proper and realistic anatomy of the human figure. Now, Romeo, your partner's not here. Was that hers or yours? Victoria. Well, this is Euphronius as well, right? So the same artist as the one that's in the textbook. This is also in the Villa Julia, although it hasn't been there all along. Most of the things that are found in this museum, the Villa Julia, that we didn't get to, were actually excavated somewhere in Italy. So even though they're Greek pots, they were export ware. They were sent off to Greek outposts in Italy, because Greece had significant outposts sort of everywhere throughout the Mediterranean. That's where these were exported to and dug up, right? And that's the brunt of that collection of things that were found there in Italy, in particular around Rome. In this particular case, Euphronius, there's a signature on it, and Euphronius is listed as only the painter. Whereas remember with Exesius, he was both the potter and the painter. He made me and he painted me, the pot says. Here's the clock now, again, it talks to us, right? Euphronius painted me, and it gives another name of a different artist, who's the potter. And that's kind of interesting because on one level it means that we're getting some pot painters that are specialists in actually just decorating the darn things rather than in sort of carrying through the entire production from start to finish. This particular example in the Villa Julia is actually the best preserved pot by Euphronius anywhere. And I say that because if you look at the one on the right, the Hercules and Antaeus one, which is in the Louvre in Paris, you'll notice how many repairs there are to it. Look at all the cracks that have been filled in by restorers, because when it was found, and dug up, it was found in pieces, and essentially pieced it all back together. But the one in the Villa Giulia is just an immaculate shape, right? Beautiful, beautiful shape. The interesting story about it, you might say, well, that's because it's in Italy. It never, didn't get sent off to France or something. And survived there. But the thing is it actually used to live in New York. It was bought by the Metropolitan Museum of Art, I think in 1972 or so, from a dealer, and it sat in the Met in New York for 30 years. 1978 to 2008, it was there. But they returned it less than 10 years ago to Italy, because it turns out that the dealer had bought it illegally. He bought it on the black market. Somebody had excavated, not told me about what they found. They found somebody who would buy it. And then when he returned the fellow to the Met, he lied about where he got it. And he produced some false papers that dated it back further and said that he had acquired it legally, when in fact by the 1970s, anything excavated in Italy had to stay in Italy and had to get sort of government approval. So he had these falsified papers that said that he bought it significantly earlier and before those rules were in place, right? So once it was proven that in fact this came off an excavation site illegally, the Met agreed to do the right thing, which is to give it back, even though they had bought it on the other end, right? It wasn't their fault, and had paid like a ton of money for it. It's the best example buying phones anywhere in the world. Imagine what that would have brought in the way, even in 1972 money, a ton of money. But the Met just had to suck it up, right? Suck up the loss and send it on back. So it's a really fascinating story, right? And that's something that's still in the news today in antiquities in particular. There was a dealer from the Getty Museum in Malibu, just outside of LA, who was actually on trial in Italy for, they claimed, that she knowingly bought illegal antiquities for the Getty collection. And Marion Trude was her name. And she spent time on trial. This ended up just getting tired of running the trial on her. Let her go. But they were kind of making a bit of a scene about her this way. If you look at these two side by side, you'll notice that I don't think you would need me to have the names on the screen to sort of identify these as being very, by very similar hands, right? The decorations, for example, especially between the handles of the tail screeners, are very, very close, if not nearly identical, right? And that should make sense because they would probably follow patterns for these bits that are secondary to the main theme. But if you compare the body of Sarpedon being carried off the battlefield with 3 wounds bleeding out, to the body of Antaeus, wrestled by Hercules at the right, you can see that the handling and the musculature in those sort of looks like a quilt, like each of the pecs has somehow been sewn together like a quilt. Sorry? His body does? Oh, it does. I can see that. Yeah, so if I were to, all I need to do is just draw a little stem right in here, and you'll get these little forms. That's not a very good. It's hard to draw with that on my finger, right? But yeah, I can see that. So here's our story of Sarpedon. Here's the next close-up of him. So you can see it. Now this is a scene from the Trojan War, right? Sarpedon dies in battle. He was a half-god. Again, we've talked about how many of these Greek heroes descended from the gods who mate with mortals. He was the son of Zeus and dies in the Trojan War. His death is actually recounted in Homer's Iliad as part of that struggle against Troy. And so here, Sarpedon is obviously dying or dead. You'll notice that he's labeled for us. Everybody is labeled for us. Hermes is in the background holding that rod that looks like a fire pincher with the helmet on. This guy here, that's Hermes, Hermes, right? And he is actually directing 2 mythological figures to carry him off the battlefield. In Greek art, as later in Roman art, we'll see there's this great intermingling between things of this world and things of the supernatural world. And so in this case, Hermes is telling Sleep, who's on the left, Dipmos, and death, who's on the right, who's Thanatos or Thanatos, to take the body away. Sleep is all we've seen as a metaphor for death, right? Conk out, right? He's just gone. And so here, sleep and death are now carrying him off of the battlefield and intervene. Hermes, by the way, is the same figure that the Romans called Mercury. And you'll notice that his little feet have got those little Mercury wings on them. Same thing that Flash has on the side of his helmet, because like Flash is supposed to be sleep-footed. Right? Flash, the superhero, he's on TV these days, so you know. I don't have to explain myself there. Although that was things I was reading in comics, which I was like, who cares? You know. Okay. So on the back side of this pot, remember all these pots are decorated on both sides, and often we've only been talking about one of the two sides. But what we see on the back side are Greek or Athenian youth arming youth, young boys, arming themselves for battle. So they strip naked, they're starting to put on their battle armor, they're carrying their shields, they're picking up their lances and whatnot. They're arming themselves for battle. And in many ways, and by the way, they're dressed in contemporary clothing. It's not meant to be a historical scene. Right? This is modern Greek soldiers. Well, okay, I'm sorry, the armament. Yeah. Contemporary Greek nudity. You can tell by the way he shaved his chest. So, in any event, what's interesting about this is it brings us back to something we've talked a lot about with Greek art, and that is their tendency to try to enhance drama. Right? We remember with Achilles and Ajax, we talked about the sort of poignant moment and how people would know the future. And in this case, pairing soldiers arming themselves to go into battle with the scene of the mythological son of a god who dies in battle only adds to the drama of the scene. You know, are they going to die? Are they going to live? Are they going to go down in history like Sarpedon did? Are they going to be a nameless victim on the battlefield? It makes this scene, in many ways, almost more poignant than the other side. Right? And it underscores that what Greeks are doing in the 6th century follows a tradition that they can trace back to their mythologies. Right? So there's a kind of a reason why these two things are paired side by side, which is to add to the drama of the contemporary moment. One other, well no, I guess we have two other. There's two other red figure faces to get through, and then we'll start talking about classical art. Erica and Olivia, long-haired Olivia. Erica, where? Yeah, long-haired Olivia is not here. Is this hers or yours? Excellent. So we don't need her. Do you want to sit up here? Do you want the hot seat? It's good. It's getting kind of warm anyway. I don't think you want to sit. I've been up here too long. Old man chair now. How's it? Ew. Okay, so Erica's going to talk to us about this talk from the Vatican Museum. Did you guys get a chance to see this when I got lost? Okay. So you did see it, but you didn't stop it. I know. I'm not blaming. I'm just clarifying. Okay. You tried to stop, but it's my fault. It's me and Carla's fault. Right? But mostly me. You were with me all the time. You were the. I was out there saving you. I was making sure that you were not wounded Sarpedon on the battlefield of the Vatican. Right, laying there bleeding out, hauled off by death and sleep. Erica, hit it.
All right. So this is by a Roman painter, and like what Mark was saying earlier, he's named after his best known Amphora.
You didn't see the Berlin Painters best known.
I'm pretty sure we saw that one.
You saw that one, definitely. But what she's saying is the Berlin Painter's name for his best-known work, which is probably, given his name is the Berlin Painter, not in the Vatican. Okay? Yeah. Go ahead.
All right.
Lion, yeah.
His bow and arrow, and the laurel branch. Sorry? Sun, music, archery, and prophecy. And this scene is him traveling over the sea, which is noted by the fish and the octopus at the very bottom.
There's really cute dolphins, too.
Yes, and he's on a winged tripod. A tripod has 3 legs, and it's a religious piece of furniture used for what's it called? Tripod? Used for rituals, and it's actually in reference to the Delphi. Delphi's oracle. And that's just the throne to the 50th, which is just the name of whoever the one telling the oracle. And so they would sit on the tripod in the sanctuary of Apollo.
Yeah, so Delphi is the sanctuary dedicated to Apollo, right? Do you know what an oracle is when she mentioned this? Yeah, it's a prophet, right? A female prophet, the Oracle of Delphi. In the Sistine Chapel, when you were looking up at Michelangelo's ceiling, right? Because a lot of time to wait for us there. In the middle were all of these scenes from Genesis, right? The creation of Adam and whatnot. And on the side were a series of prophets who foretold the coming of Christ. So some of them are Hebrew prophets from the Bible, and some of them are secular prophets from Roman and Greek mythology. And one of them is the Delphic Sibyl, which is the Oracle of Delphi, right? Is one of the figures that's on the Sistine Seal, right? And so she sat on a tripod chair, in a temple dedicated to Apollo, right? So this makes reference to immediately that. Okay? Good, go.
So going back to the theme park, he's accompanied by 2 dolphins. There's not a lot of dolphins actually mentioned in any of the mythology, but it could be in reference to Poseidon, because they're closely associated in many stories, like they were called to build the Trojan walls together. So it could just be Poseidon guiding him, or they're just known as elders of humankind. And so there was a couple theories as to why he was traveling over the sea, but the most common theory is that it represents his journey from his birthplace to Delphi, where he stepped in Apollo's sanctuary.
Excellent. Great. One of the reasons that we might think it's associated with Poseidon is the god of the sea, the Romans called him Neptune, right? Is that whenever we see Poseidon, sorry, it's cold. Whenever we see Poseidon, he's carrying a trident, which is a pitchfork with 3 prongs on it. It looks very much like that, but sort of upside down, So that's another reason to think the Poseidon connection is probably a strong one for the dolphins that way. Let's see. The idea of the tripod, one of the things that I read about this was that the reason that the oracle at Delphi sat on a 3-legged stool is, one, it's obviously stable. It's more stable than a 4-legged stool, if you think about it, because there's no way it's off balance, right? A 4-legged, you sit at an outside cafe and you're always like, trying to get to taste this thing, right? It's got 4 legs. If it had 3 legs, it would never be off, because it can't. 3 legs define, 3 points define its weight, and a 4th one can be off of that plane, right? So a 3-legged stool is more stable. That's one thing. So, and stability of knowledge. Right? But the other reason for 3 legs is that, at least in Greek mythology, it says about the 3 legs also relates to what an oracle can do. An oracle can see the past, an oracle can see the present, and the oracle can see the future. Right? So the ability to see all things, all elements of time, is a symbolic reason for a three-legged stool as well. And often in the history of art, when we see things included, sometimes these little choices have also further symbolic reference that we can find when we look into the literature of it. So we see him with olive leaves, we see him with music represented by the lyre, and we see the arrows on the back, as Erica mentioned, he's also the god of archery. The reason he's the god of archery is that the arrows were seen as having a connection to the rays of the sun, right? And if you think about watching how sun breaks through the clouds, you get this idea, right? So just like cloud rays come shooting down, so that's what Apollo does, so it shoots the rays of the sun. And insofar as the laurel, right, leaves are concerned, this, John Belushi in Animal House. I'm going to keep trying, right? Anyway, the laurel wreath there has to do with one of the legends of Apollo. Apollo was, there's a complicated backstory to this, and I'm not going to get into all that, but the bottom line is that Apollo, great, I'm glad you're not going to. The door's open. This is actually a great story. So Apollo was, you're going to get it anyway. You're going to get it. I'm going to show it to you, as a matter of fact. So Apollo, I wish you guys didn't find this so terribly amusing. It's not, right? Apollo, hang on, I gotta multitask here. Sorry, I'm good. Apollo was shot by an arrow that made him fall in love with whoever he saw next, right? Venus gets mad at him, Aphrodite gets mad at him, has Cupid shoot him with an arrow with a gilded tip that makes him immediately fall in love with whoever he sees next. He sees this woman named Daphne. Right? And then just to get at him, Cupid shoots Daphne with a arrow with a lead tip. And that makes Daphne hate whoever she sees next. So the moment that Apollo sees Daphne, wow, she sees Apollo is, right? Which is hard to imagine, he's a sun god, and he's young, and he's beautiful, and all of this, but she still hates him. Okay? And so she, I'm going to bring it up here. So she's Renaissance Baroque. Come on. Borghese, Galleria Borghese. This is what I did when you guys were all playing around on Wednesdays. I went and saw this amazing thing of Apollo and Daphne. It's fascinating and incredible. Bingo, right? So at the moment that he catches up to her, this is a 17th century sculpture by Bellini, with Apollo and Daphne. So he's chasing her. She wants nothing to do with him, nothing to do with him, nothing to do with him. And as soon as he gets to her, she decides, I'm never going to let him have me. And she has herself turned into a tree. So he can't get it, because he's God, right? And so Bellini here shows us the actual moment where she turns into a laurel tree. And her fingers are turning into laurel branches. It's really cool. Not just cool, it's really cool. This is in Rome. It's in the Galleria Borghese. And Karen and I went here on that Wednesday afternoon. I gave you guys off. This is not why I gave it off, right? So there her hands are turning into the leaves. And even her toes are sprouting, right? It's wacko cool. Yeah. I do too. He rocks my world. He is not overrated by any means, right? And let's see, where's her toes? I'll show you her toes. And you can see her toes are also now turning into the roots of the tree, right? So this is why, if we go back to what Eric was telling us about, one of his attributes is the laurel branch. It's his ongoing devotion to Daphne, right? Who he can never have. Sorry? It's the laurel branch that he wears in his head. right? So, and we saw this in both of them. We talked about the Minad. We saw him with Laurel Branch too. Joanna brought that up as well. So, make those very nice. So forget that. Right? It's just a problem. Okay, now, where are we here? Doink. Doink. Karen and Olivia C. Curly-haired Olivia have this one. The last of our red figure vases, and we'll take a break. So, we've heard this myth before, but why don't you tell us again what it's all about? Nemean.
Which was inspired with the incredible skin. So, it was showing a bunch of people running around the countryside, around the city of Numidia. And since one of them took to the lion, Hercules' option was to strangle it, or I heard both, like they either strangled it or if he like killed it through the mouth.
Mm-hmm.
So the one I looked up is that he strangled it. And then, in it, Hercules battling the demon lion is the most frequent depicted scene in Greek art. And in early depictions, Hercules stands facing the lion, but by the late 500 BC, it shows them more stretched out, so like they take up more of the pot, and so they're just standing next to each other, and that way their bodies are like more connected. So I guess like on this red figure, you can see more as they touch each other.
Here, I got the detail. Yeah, there's the figure.
Yeah, you can see like his hands are in his mouth and stuff. And can you do black figure pattern? You can't really do that as much. And then on this one, the one I looked at the wrong one, and the one I had, it had a tree over it, which was really rare in Greek art because they usually just focus on the characters instead of nature, but this one has a tree, obviously. And then the one I looked up the other side has like dude with the goat, but this isn't so close. So, this is by Slavery Canon, and I read that his favorite figures to do with Hercules. I don't know if that's true, but apparently he did a lot of Hercules skating. Yeah, that's about it.
You know what?
The views before water.
You know where his name comes from? I don't either. I'm just curious. Something, again, it probably has to do with his most famous plot having a scene of Cleophas as opposed to Heracles. And as we've seen, I mean, a lot of people like Heracles anyway, right? But it seems like this painter did quite a few of them. So you mentioned a couple of things. One is the myth that there are two different versions of him. That's not uncommon in Greek mythology. In fact, it's not common in many ancient societies. When you go back to ancient Egyptian religion, for example, there are multiple versions of each of the gods' stories. And so it's not uncommon to have variations of the story. That said, Olivia, which of the two do you think this guy, Rhapsody painter, is using as the basis for his painting? I think so too, right? They make a big thing of him yanking it off the part. It is, but it's still behind him. He's not really got it all the way around the neck like that. He's kind of reaching and pulling it apart, right? You'll notice behind him he's got that gnarly, stumpy club that we've seen in other images of Hercules, and we'll see in future ones when we get to some of the ones that we didn't see before. That's one of his standard attributes. Why is his sword hanging in the background?
Because it's against the lion, so he just wanted to.
Bingo. It's useless against the lion, and it also goes to something we talked about earlier tonight, which is that he's got to do it by himself, right? No assistance in order to do the 12 labors. He's got to do it by himself. So he's hung up his sword, he's put aside his club, it's hand-to-hand combat. Okay. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you because someone in the class was being rude. The dog.
Yeah. So you see that. In the dog, he does have more dog. He has like 2 like the dog is in the beginning as well.
But the doggy just captures, right? I think the doggy doesn't actually defeat, he just gets it and takes it. Okay, no, so that's why we don't get all of our ingredients. It's a great taste tester. Yeah. I like also, one of the things I like about this particular painting, notice how simple, by the way, the drawing is compared to, say, Euphronius, right? There's none of that detail to the anatomy. It's mostly relies on outline. And even the understanding of the pectoral muscles of the chin of Heracles is a little awkward compared to some of the other more sophisticated things we've seen. And that gives you a sense, I think, why we think Euphronius is so darn good. You know, those people in the art community think he's so good. And really highlight people back in the day in Greek society by this. But I do like some of the elements. I love that the lion's paw in his head. It's almost like a plane in a way. You know, he's pushing it like this. When he wakes up in the morning, my dog will do this. Sometimes he'll push it like that paw. It's not that he's fighting or anything. He's just sort of. But again, that's also the archaic smile. Remember, we saw that in other things where we use that smile. I also like the fact that both of there's something really similar about the way they sort of situated the legs of the two figures. The way Heracles' leg goes back up and actually rests against that frame, almost as if the framing device, which is just decorative, is actually a physical element in his space. And so his foot is pushing against that, the same way the lion's foot is pushing against Heracles' head. And each of them has the other foot down on its pads and pushing against the ground in this really kind of similar way. And then, of course, they both show off their testicles in kind of a similar way as well. And I think there's a sort of parallelism between the two of them that the artist is trying to bring out that makes it, as a piece of design, that much more interesting. Well, excellent. Thank you very much. Let's take a break. That's the end of the class and stuff. I've got one more work that somebody's responsible for, Margaret and Vanessa, right? I gave you two. The Athena Parthenon? You have the other one? Excellent. Okay, so let's take till 5 o'clock and come back, and we'll work our way into class focus art. Okay, recording again. No, you're not sorry. I'm the sorry. Apparently. Right. You said you were sorry. I said, no, I'm the sorry one.
I did not.
Been there. So have I. I bought a stupid little Greek fisherman's hat on the way up. It was really dumb. I was 18. Thank you for asking. Okay, so we were. Who wrote on my notes? Alina, how are you? We've been talking so far about the archaic period of Greek art, which is a period term that historians have defined. In other words, it's not like the Greeks said, hey, we're archaic. You know, it's just a term that historians have used to try to categorize this very long period of Greek history that really, for Greek culture, lasts all the way from around 800 BC to around 0 or so. And so archaic is a period that is prior to a major event in Greek history, which is the Persian War. We call it the Persian War because it's the War of Athens against Persia. Right? Isn't that 300? Did you guys see that animated thing? Wasn't that Athens versus Persia? I think it was. Yeah. Right? And the Persian War is against the people that are the inheritors of the traditions we talked about when we looked at Mesopotamian art.
Greece against Persia.
The Persians are the inheritors of the traditions that we talked about when we were looking at Assyrian art and earlier Sumerian art. They actually adapted those things, which means that after this point we begin to see increasingly some of the impact of those traditions in Greek art as well, although there are already some there. And after that, exactly, ushered in, and again, it's a historical period that historians have given to Greek culture, not something the Greeks woke up after the war and say, hey, now we're classical. Okay? Now that said, one of the things that you'll often find in your research is that people talk about the classical era in general, right? The classical world. And that's a different use of the same term. That's basically all of ancient Greece, all of ancient Rome, right, is the classical world. But for Greek history per se, there's this classical period that historians have defined, and it begins with the Persian War. And the victory of Athens over the Persians ushered in really the greatest period of Greek history. Sort of the highlight of everything. This is the period when Socrates is writing philosophy. You've heard of Socrates, right? Aeschylus is writing literature in this period, in the 5th century, mid-5th century. Herodotus is writing history. And this is really the high point of their entire history and development, is the classical period. It's kind of the epitome of it all. And the reason we call the period differently, not only is it sort of this flowering of culture in Athens in particular, but also it brought a shift in style, particularly in the style of art. We begin to see a kind of art that's different in many ways from archaic Greek art. Some of the roots of it is there, but something else begins to happen. There seems to be a shift in focus on a certain level that we'll talk about as we look at these works of classical Greek art. So, one of the things that happened to usher in the period was the rebuilding of the temple, the Parthenon. There had been a temple there for the city of Athens, right? And you can see modern Athens there, how big it is. But the city of Athens was grouped around this flat-topped outcropping, right? And the city sort of laid between it and the ocean, around the base of it. And they called this flat-topped mountain the Acropolis. There's the Acropolis, and you can see that's what it looks like, right? It's flat-topped, and they sort of shored up the sides of it and buttressed it. And the word Acropolis simply means city on high. You know the term acrophobia? It's fear of high places, right? I'm horrible. I have horrible acrophobia. And Herod tortures me, right? When we were at Lyon, this town in northeastern France, it's on a flat top kind of like this. And he went out to the edge of this 60-foot drop, and his helmet looked like this, and I'm just like, I'm wetting myself personally. Right? And they started laughing at me. I have acrophobia, right? Acropolis is city. That's why we use politics, right? It comes from the same root word. It's government, right? Civic structure. So the Acropolis was the city on high. And while the main city of Athens stretched around the base of it, on top was a temple to the goddess of Athens. They finally figured out who the goddess of Athens was. Athena, right? The city's named after her. Exactly. So there was a temple to Athena on the Acropolis. And again, if we think back to things we've talked about before, remember the Mesopotamians with their ziggurats, the Egyptians with their pyramids? There's this idea of a mountaintop that's just special, right? And the Greeks do it as well. I mean, they believe in Mount Olympus, right? Which is on top of a mountain where the god lives. So why not put the temple on the top of the Acropolis, right? So there's been one there from the founding of Athens, centuries earlier. It was utterly destroyed during the Persian War. Totally destroyed. And there was, kind of like 9/11, there was some talk about leaving the ruins as a reminder of the war, right? Never again and whatnot. But then they decided to rebuild, right? Around 450 or so, they decided to rebuild. Under the great mayor of Athens, his name is Hermes. And this is the sort of the apogee of this classical moment, is the rebuilding of the Parthenon, which is the new temple to Athena on the top of the Acropolis. And I'm going to put up a 10-minute art pic to talk about the building, because the building itself is one of these sort of perfect structures. Every art and history class talks about it. You've been there and you haven't taken the class before, right? And the entire building has been totally fine-tuned to look just perfect. Point to a couple of things. The base bends a bit from end to end, right? So it's lower at the corners than it is in the middle. And that's because if it were actually straight, you have this optical illusion that makes it look like it's this. So if it looks straight, you made it bend. Right? Because it's through this way. Yeah. The other thing that's a bit of an optical illusion, I can see on this slide, is that these are evenly spaced. So if the corner one is closer, can you see that? On either side. That distance is smaller than that distance. Right? Is that very clear, right? And that's because if it were the same distance, it would look like it's hanging out from the front. So it's been brought in a little bit to make it look more uniform, right? And with that in mind, and with the fact that it's low, all of those columns sort of pitch over, right? And the columns also have a very slight swelling in the middle, like that, right? That makes it look straight. What it means is that there isn't a single, the columns are made up of shafts, right? You can see some of the breaks. These are all been carved and then set up on site. And what it means, because of the way these things all bend in ever so slightly, and more so on the outside than the inside, that you couldn't take a shaft from this column and put it in that column. Every shaft is individually column, right? They couldn't move from one to the other because the pitch is different in the way that they move. Right? And any stone here has only one place it can possibly go. So the building itself is really an engineering marvel in a lot of different ways. And then there are other things. There's one system of ratios that defines all of the measurements. So the standard distance between these, for example, the distance from here to here, is a single ratio from that to the circumference. And the circumference is the same ratio to the height. It's fascinating how much engineering went into this, right? So this is a major building for them to commemorate their victory in the Persian War, right? This building is put up specifically to replace the old building and to be this great monument to where Greece is now. And they're giving it everything they've got, right? All of these measurements the Greeks are so well known for, Greek mathematics. And then there are the decorations. Standard Greek temples are always decorated along the top. So here's the decorations here and here. There were the decorations in what we call the pediment up above as well. And there was a massive statue inside of, guess who? Athena, right? So you come up to the Acropolis, right? There's a ramp that leads up this way. There's only one way onto the top of the mountain. It's through the gateway right here, right? So they control your access to it. They control the way you perceive it. And as you work your way up the hill, and you come through the gate, right? Here's the structure that you're working with. And every 4 years, all of the Athenians get together to make a huge procession. And horses and everything. And they would work their way up, come through, and then the entry to the temple is on the far side. So you have to walk up, once you come through, you walk up the path, and you come to the temple from the other side, which we never walk by it, right? But also, when you come through the gateway called the Propaedea introduction, you end up with the footprint, corner on, right? So it looks really mapped out, even the surface of the Acropolis. And here, the same ratios define the Propaedea, the gateway. You'll notice it's significantly wider in the middle because you got to get horses as well, right? And animals and sacrifices. So, and then what they would do every 4 years is they would bring, so they had this massive statue. It's missing. We have descriptions, we have copies, right? Massive statue. Think of that Constantine that we saw, right? Ahead of it in one bigger, okay? Standing with gold and alabaster by inscription. And every 4 years they would drink her in a constant, a peplum is what they call it, Greek road. And so this every 4 years was this idea of clothing the statue, right? Was part of the ritual of giving honor to Athena. Right? Now Athena is the goddess of, wait, Vanessa, you have Athena coming up, okay? Right? Who's Athena the goddess of? You have your notes. Indeed. So you see why this is important, right? Wisdom and military victory. That means that this monument to Athena is twofold, right? On one hand, military victory, right? The Persian War. Second, wisdom. Because for the Greeks, the way they thought of the victory, right? The way they wanted people to remember the victory. And whenever you win something, you get a paint of the losers, right? Winners get to say this is a loser, And it's sad, but it's true. I don't like it, but it happens, right? And what the Athenians did on winning this victory was they said, this is not just a victory of Athens over Persia. This was a victory of rational thinking over Spain. This was a victory of civilization over barbarian. Right? And so a monument to Athena is not only a monument to military victory, but a monument to wisdom, right? And this all tied into this military victory and monument. So you walk around the far side, right? So you see it from this side, you walk now past it that direction, right? And then you come around the other side, and you see it's very badly damaged. It has seen many, many better days. It's because Greece, after this great period of history, was often colonized by external powers. Everybody from the Ottoman Turks to the Brits. This is why most of the really good sculptures that were in the pediment are now in the British Museum in London. Right? It's because in 1802, a British diplomat working for the Brits who colonized, the statues were laying around the foot of it. He took them home. He's going to put them in his garden. Then he decided to donate them to the British government. They've been there ever since 1802, right? The Elgin marbles, Lord Elgin was the Lord of that. So here we watch on the other side. We're about to go into the temple to see the statue of Athena, which has since been lost. But there are numerous copies, and one of them, Vanessa's going to tell us a little bit about, right? So Vanessa, do you want to come up here? Okay, but you have to talk real loud because the AC is on, okay? Excellent. Can you spell the name of that artist, the second artist that worked on this? Not Phidias, but the other one. Yeah, spell that for me. Antioco. A-N-T-I-O-C-O. Antioco. So he's the copyist. So this is not an original, right? Nor is it even a direct copy per se. A lot of the Roman statues that we saw, right, were fairly close copies of original lost bronzes. For example, if you remember the discus thrower had those two knobs on his head that were used to make the copy as opposed to the should be to the original. This one is a little bit different. This one is inspired by the original, but not necessarily a direct copy of it. And the reason for that, of course, is that the original was like 60 feet tall, and this one is a little bit larger than life size. So this is in the Plaza Altos, which you guys had today, the sunny day off instead of going to, right? This is one of the ones we would have talked to you about had we gone to that museum. Yeah. Well, you see how the building itself, somebody may not know where it is. When we say a work is lost, it's not like it's misplaced. What we mean is that it's destroyed, right? And what happened to it is anybody's guess, right? you'll notice that the building is very, very badly damaged. No, not entirely. No, partly, maybe part of it, but really a lot of it, most of it's human damage. As well, the earthquakes do enter into it. This is a very seismically prone region. When this region was governed by the Ottoman Turks, it was being used as a munition soak. There was a place to put ammunition inside of it, and that exploded and ripped out one of the walls on the side. I don't think you can see it in this particular picture, but this side on this over here, you can see that side, this part in the middle just missing because it exploded, right? But insofar as when the statue of Athena, one restaurant in a second, when the statue of Athena was lost, right, it has to do with the fact that it was made from fine materials. And this is that your point?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. You go.
Oh, I was just going to ask if it's like completely made of gold.
Gold and alabaster, yeah.
And,
that's right. Do you know that there's a copy, there's a closely faithful copy of this in National Citizen.
Yeah, but after the
Right. And do they have the statue on the inside? Well, we've never seen the outside.
Basically it's a copy of the entire Parthenon, like how it would be protected.
And in scale, right?
In scale, yeah. You can walk in it and everything. And the Athena is there, and she's painted and she's gold, and like there's a stack on it.
Oh, here. This is a recreation information.
That's what it looks like.
But we don't know for sure. We've had descriptions and some copies. So you'll notice that the work on the right, which is 1st century BC AD, so we're right around there, but inspired by Phidias's original. And we know that Phidias was the sculptor of this original, and he was the supervisor of all of the sculptures on the Parthenon, right? So here in a recreation, I like the little dolls of the place too, to give you a sense of scale, right? This may be what she looked like, but we're not 100% sure, right? This is a recreation of it based on some other statues that we have. Okay? So this is a 1st century BC work. I'm calling it this century because that's the original that inspired. Okay? And I'm using it for the discussion over here. So very good. Thank you very much for that. In this case, Athena, by the way, the head is the part that's mostly restored, right? The body is original. The head, I think, is 17th century. But you'll notice that the gesture of her hands doesn't seem to follow what it looks like here. At the same time, you'll notice that she has that massive staff, and that head could well have held onto it. Right? Now, I wanted to point to two other things about this as we begin to talk about classical Greek art. One is you'll notice that she has on her breastplate. Can you see what that is? It's Medusa, exactly, right? Remember the legend of Medusa, the snake-haired woman whose very gaze would turn people to stone, right? Now, she wears it because of her role as the goddess of warfare. Sorry? Gorgon. Gargoyle is on the building. It's my job as a teacher. Okay, right. That may well be. Oh, so she walked in on Athena with Poseidon?
No. Athena walked in on Medusa and Poseidon in her temple.
Oh. And so why does she how does that relate to her wearing a picture of Medusa on her chest?
I read like this book about like ancient Olympian things, and it said like Medusa reflects like evil background of people, and it's a way to like it's like evil eye. Like you wear
to ward off evil. Well, certainly there are some early Greek temples where, in fact, there's one in your textbook. There's really a temple where in the pediment of the temple there's an image of Medusa here. And it certainly does that same idea to keep people from coming, right? Now, I don't know why Athena would wear that, though. That's kind of awkward, doesn't it? Because in many ways, does she want everybody to run away from her? It's that,
it also said like, there's just something about like women wear it as like a way to protect themselves, because like whenever you read about Medusa, like trying to put down and something men.
Right.
So they just like the games would not work on women, and they just use it for protection for women.
That makes sense. So next time we go to Rome, we'll get you all a Medusa medallion to wear to keep the ragazzi out of the way. You'll notice also that she's also got a snake belt as well, right? And that makes you wonder again. Remember our Minoan figure that had also the snakes on her decorations everywhere. The other thing I wanted to point to with this is two things. Look at the pose, where her right leg is bearing all of the weight, and her left foot is sort of back, right? So you actually see the strike that. You have this like out, all of your weight on it, right? And once you put your foot like that, you're not, all you're doing is balancing yourself, right? And at the same time, while this leg is flexed, right, her right leg is flexed, her left arm is flexed, right? And while this leg is loose, this arm is loose, right? You have slack, flex, on either side. And that's a pose we're going to see a lot in classical Greek art. And it's one of the reasons art historians refer to this period as being different from the archaic period. Because the next the next step forward from those flat-footed choral students, right? Who had their legs apart, one of the things is bearing more weight than like this, right? This becomes more natural. And what ends up suggesting is that the figure pretty much has the capacity to stay, like they're at rest. But at the same time, they're engaged, right? At the same time, they're flexing parts of their body. But in a balanced way, right? Not everything flexed on one side, right? But rather in a sort of counterpoise way. And there's a term coming up for this, which we'll see in a second. It's called contraposition, counterpoint, counterposition, right? And once you take a pose like that, you realize that it's an easier way to stand, which is exactly why in London they make the guy stand like this, because that's harder, so more diligent to do that. But that's actually a fairly comfortable way to stand, and is a hallmark of what we end up seeing when we're looking at classical Greek art. Excellent. Thank you very much. That's terrific. I wanted to compare her back as we talk about this pose to this earlier Kore figure, where we can see that stiffness that was so much a part of these earlier figures, even though we may have one arm flexed and one arm down, right, has now moved into something that has an easier sense of grace. And since the pose itself allows you to hold it for a long time, there's kind of a sense of timelessness. It's almost as if you look at the statue and you get the sense that you could turn away and look back and not a lot would change. You know? It's in this sort of sense of repose that is everywhere exactly the same. And this is a hallmark of statuary in the in the Roman period. The other thing the classical Greek period. The other thing I'd like you to look at here, and keeping in mind that this is a first century copy, so it's at least 400 years later, is that the drapery also reflects the pose underneath it, and that's something the Greeks do regularly. Our Roman copyists do that as well. So the leg that is bearing the weight, you'll notice that the drapery on that leg, it's straight up and down, too. It's all vertical. It looks like flutes on a column. You know? They reiterate the verticality of that, and they look as if it's, you know, like sticks stuck in the ground, columns that bear the weight on the hip. Right? Whereas the drapery on the other side, on the flat leg, also hangs flat, doesn't it? So it reiterates the pose underneath it. Also, the drapery is a bit on the creamy side. It almost looks as if it's been misted down, you know, a little bit wet, almost. And that's also a hallmark of work done by Phidias. And as we look at more sculptures from the Parthenon, because he supervised all of the artists that were working on the Parthenon, including Carpal, right? So he's the artistic supervisor. All of them are hallmarked by this wet drapery style. And so this is one of the reasons we think this Roman copy is looking back at Phidias' work. It has some vestiges of that wet drapery. Also, various elements suggest that this is directly related to our theme of art. Right? But for us, I think it shows very clearly how this new pose has replaced the stiffness of earlier archaic pose, which is why we as historians talk about it as a new or a different period of Greek art, right? This classical period. Another Athena from Rome. This is in the Plaza Massimo on your left. So we actually probably walked by this at one point or another. Do you have a picture of that? Yeah. You'll notice it also has the contrapposto posing where the arms are missing. One foot is bearing the weight. The other foot is slack. It's not as finely carved as that one on the right is. But you'll notice again that the drapery style, right, down below hangs directly vertical on the leg that's bearing the weight, and more slack, looping around the leg that's not bearing the weight. Still has the Gorgon's head as a brooch binding the drapery above, and you can also see some elements of that drapery style as well. Right? So probably also related to the great statue by Phidias, but in a less direct manner as well. Let's just show you up next. Was that there? Yeah, contrapposto, so you can spell contrapposto as well. Here's a bust of Athena. As you might imagine, during this period of Athenian prominence, images of Athena would be very, very popular. This bust also from the Palazzo Alphonse, which we skipped on that last page there. But you'll notice that as you look at her face, and this has some restorations to the nose, but the rest of it is original. They lost that archaic smile, that silly little attempt that we saw with archaic sculpture to get the figure there. You know, it's gone, and the face. And keep in mind that one of the right is a 17th century reconstruction, right? Here's something more original. The face has almost nothing in the way of an expression. I mean, the lips might be parted a little bit, but it's not like they're really showing any particular emotion or any particular mental state. That it, too, is timeless in a way, perfected. It doesn't appear portrait-like per se. It's almost like it's an amalgam of facial features from everybody. You know, this is what eyes look like for everybody, rather than what my eyes look like versus Sam's. You know, it's not trying to be individualized, but rather is trying to find that sort of perfect ideal, which relates to the idea of, or the concept of finding a timelessness in the works of art. So do you guys remember this one from when we first walked into the Palazzo Massimo, right near our hotel, right? Massive, right? Huge statue of Athena, oversized. Again, the head is a reconstruction, right? And rather quite a bad one. It's really unfortunate head. But the body, right, has everything we've been seeing all along. Now, she's seated, so she's not contrapposto. But even at that, you'll notice that one foot is planted firmly on the ground, and the other foot is about to stand up, right? One of them is meant to push up, so she can actually stand. She's in between the two poses. We don't know where her hands initially were. They may have been off to the side and resting on the post, but they've both been broken off. But here you can see with the body, that's the original bit. Again, the head of the Gorgon, right, the head of Medusa. That makes it easy to immediately identify her. But even without a head, we do this with Athena. But you can also see the drapery stuff, how it clings to the body and almost hangs heavy between her knees. This is all, again, typical of the 5th century style, the classical style. And the pose here that we see with the one foot forward, the other back, one foot bearing weight, the other one resting on the balls of its toes, and the way the drapery wraps around this can be related directly back to the Parthenon. This is some of the sculptures that Lord Elgin took back to London with him. These were originally the pediment of the Parthenon, right? Where they actually arranged the statues standing or kneeling or laying down so that they would fit in the pediment, right? The pediment is this long, narrow triangle, right? These are actually on the yeah. So they're not, it's not,
It's like a little piece.
there's a little piece there, right? So if you think about a pediment like this, and how do you build a pediment like this in sculpture, you got to have two options, right? You make a really big sculpture here, right? Yeah. And a tiny little one here, right? That's one possibility. In the archaic period, that's what they did. It's not very practical. The other option is then you make one here and you make this guy leaning, right? Doing this. And then you make this guy over here laying down. Right? And that's exactly what we have here. So those figures would have fit in nice and tightly into that little corner of the pediment. Right? Right? That little corner of the pediment. Right? And you can see that one sits up and in a pose it looks just like hers, doesn't it? And then the other two are melded together and they lean back. And you'll notice that, now this is one of the men is directed, right? This is one of the works that was supervised by T. Okay? Phidias was the supervisor of all of the sculptures on the carpet, not the actual carving that is going through the building itself, but the sculptures that adorn it were all supervised by one guy. And the reason for that is that the people of Athens wanted the building to have cohesive harmony, right? So you get 1,000 guys carving on this, and let's just even say 100 guys carving on this. You want somebody saying, no, this way. Because you don't want sculptures to look next to them like this, like that head, right? You don't want things next to each other to be actors and work together. Yeah? So they put these and started them all. And he dictated many things, including the one great stuff. And you'll notice that he picked up in our thesis, which we'll talk about today. And this first century copy, 400 years later, or 600 years later, where that same foundation is still made as so this drapery is part of the classical style. This use of the contrapposto is also a huge part of this classical style because it gives us a sense of unchanging, right? Of eternal, of perfection. Perfect things don't move. Perfect things are always the same. They don't age, you know? And that's exactly what the classical period is bringing us as an interest. Did anybody take a picture of him? He's in the Taquine Museum. Another work attributed, the original attributed to Phidias of now our god Apollo, who we've recently seen. In this case, it looks as if some of the fragments in his hands are perhaps references to the lyre that we've seen before, although I can't tell you for sure. At the same time, it looks as if he's got his laurel wreath on. And in this case, he's the young, beardless Apollo, right? The youthful Apollo, rather than the aged one that we saw before. But for the sake of our discussion tonight, notice the contrapposto pose, right? You've got a flexed leg, a relaxed leg. In this case, the relaxed arm is on the same side as the relaxed leg, right? And the flexed arm on the same side as the flexed leg. But on the norm, it's side to side. It's counterpoise. But he still gives you that sense of a great balance that allows you to keep the pose forever. You'll also notice, I'm going to do a little drawing here, that the knees are on a bit of an angle this way, the hips on a bit of an angle that way, right? The shoulders on a bit of an angle that way. Yeah? Also, you'll notice that with this leg forward, the body is beginning to turn in that direction just a bit, but the face looks in that direction. Here's where we're getting that counter-posturing, right? That counter-posing of the work. Right? So it's all been thought out about how the parts relate to each other. And this is exactly what we talked about when we saw the Parthenon. Right? Every part of the Parthenon has been thought through in relation to how it proportionally works with the other parts. Another contrapposto from Palazzo Massimo of Dionysus. In this case, he's wearing one of those animal skins. We talked about Dionysus' relationship to the wild world of the woods, right? And in this case, he's got one of his favorite chums, skins, draped over his shoulders. But as a work from the 5th century, which is the high point of the classical period, it again has that contrapposto pose or elements of it. And it's something you should be able to recognize almost immediately, from this point forward. Now, the part of the reason that so many artists are using this contrapposto pose is because of this work. And because of this artist, Polyclitus. Polyclitus wrote a textbook for artists to use to actually compose and model the perfect human figure. Right? And the gist of the textbook is that harmony in the human body comes via ratios. Remember, Athena is the goddess of wisdom, right? Knowledge. Ratios. So, to understand the human body, one must understand the ratio of the length of the finger to the length of the hand. The ratio of the length of the hand to the length of the forearm. The ratio of the length of the forearm to the whole arm. The ratio of the arm to the torso. And on and on. Everything is understood in a rational way, right? In how it relates, its ratio, to other parts. And the Greeks applied this in the classical period, not only to the human form, but to architecture as well. And with the treatise, Polyclitus made a bronze statue that could be cast and recast. We talked about bronze casting this class, didn't we? We did down at the museum that day, right? Okay, we'll talk about it again. So this is now a Roman copy of a bronze original. We saw a number of these, right? We saw some bronze originals as well, but we saw quite a few Roman copies of bronze originals. So that peg would not have originally been there, but it's necessary so the arm doesn't break. Okay? This stump was probably not originally there, but it's necessary so the body doesn't break, the legs don't break, right? But in the original, the rest of it is a close copy. Okay? Now, bronze statues. How do you make a bronze statue? What the artist would do to make this, right, is you start off with a matrix, sort of a, this is by the way we're talking about kind of models. What you do is you sort of rough out the body out of shape, like and so you get the arm coming down right here, and you get the other arm coming over here. You might do this hand coming up like that separately because it's very difficult to have that way. So that might be a separate piece over there, right? And then you get the body coming from here, and you just sort of rough it out. That's all you would need to do. Okay? And that arm. I haven't drawn any. I just do your art. Okay, so rough it out, right? Like I'm roughing it out. And then you take this base, right? This matrix, and then you wait till it's dry, and then you cover it with another material that you can do to finish part of it. And you put that material on this signature you wanted, the bronze signature. In the middle, you can use wax, right? And in certain parts of antiquity, they might have used wax as well. But what you do is you could finish the exterior, right under the softer material around the outside of this hard form, right? And then, once you've got it to where you want it, you can case the entire thing in another material. Right? You wait and you let it dry, and then when you take it apart, you get rid of the soft junk, and you've got the outside, and the plaster, you've got the inside, the back. And there are usually some paint in between them. And if you put all that together, you pour hot bronze into it, it goes to where that hot material needs to be. Right? So if you're using wax, it's really easy because all you got to do is heat the whole thing up and the wax just runs out. And then you pour that in. But if it's something like soft clay, you got to go. Okay. So you pour the bronze in, and it comes out, and then you treat it. Polish it, chip off the little tags that cut the core from rattling around inside of there, you know. And then you treat it with chemicals to give it the color you want. You've seen some bronzes that are like gold, and some bronzes that are brown, some bronzes that are green, like that's all those different things. Yeah. So that's how the original business is. And what that means is once you've got the cap, you can cap it. Right? If you're careful, you've got that plastic, you've got the core. Pour the bronze in, take it out. Do it again. Right? And you take multiple. So polyclitus is tested on the human figure. How does the human figure make reference to a bronze statue that illustrates? So, your textbook all that institution. That's what they use. And so this spear river was the basis of that instruction on how to do the process just. How to get the ratio of the human body. Right? As you notice, compared to the other ones that we looked at, that it really has the right leg is locked, left arm is locked. Right leg is flat, left arm is flat. Body turns to the right, head turns to the left. Right? Shoulders caught one direction, hips the other direction, knees the same direction, but then the ankles the other direction. Okay? Everything counterbalanced. So part of the reason we see so many cultures from the 5th century, in the classical period, relying on contrapunto, is this is what is being taught as the proper and perfect way to do the human figure. Okay? It's all from polyclitus. Yeah. This is what he originally looked like. The spear bearer had a spear over his left shoulder, right? That in the original bronze is lost. Now this is a copy, right? The original bronze does not survive. This is the best marble copy of that bronze. It's in Naples, right? The one on the left. But we can reconstruct it from his treatise, right? What it originally looked like. And because this was part of that treatise, because this was so important for how Romans learned how to make art, Greeks learned how to make art, there are copies everywhere. So here's the head of the Doryphorus. Doryphorus means spear bearer in Greek. Right? This is his head. A copy of his head. May have come from a complete statue. The nose is totally redone. Right? Look at the size of that schmuck. Right? It's not a particularly Greek-looking nose. But even up in the Walters in Baltimore, we've got a copy of this as well. Most of the copies are so exact that we can use them to study the original. We have a really good idea of what this thing looks like because of the multiple copies. But we've already seen with those statues of Athena that this was used everywhere through the classical period. Right? And part of it is an appeal to this idea of mental rationality and perfection that really only exists up here and not in the world around us. That's why the figures don't move. That's why they just stand. Your text gives you another bronze original that follows Polyclitus' idea. This was only found like in the 1940s. Have you seen it? Was it said the National Gallery found it, or was it something else? I've never seen him. I would love to get down to him. Reggio Calabria. Yeah, the two of them. Yeah, this one's in your textbook. The two of these works. And they were found by a pair of kids who were out scuba diving in like shallow water. Right? Yeah. But can you imagine you're down there, a couple of teenagers are out there goofing off with snorkels. They're not even scuba diving, right? They're snorkeling. And they're sort of in a not too deep bay, and they look down, and this thing is coming up, right, out of the, and they, holy crap, and they went down, and you can't pull it out because the day is done. But they notified the authorities, and there we have it. And this is the middle of last century, right? This is 1940s or 50s, not that long ago, in the grand scheme of things. You remember from the trip downtown, how many of these things, most of our Greek bronzes that have survived because they were lost at sea, right? They were shipwrecked. And so in the Hellenistic show that I took some people to a couple weeks ago, there were some things that were found as much as 1,500 feet under the ocean, and some as recently as 5 years ago. You know, they're still pulling these things up. So this is just a warrior speaking, right? It's found in the town of Riachi, that's why it's called that. But gives you a sense also of how easily the figure could stand without the supports of the original bronze, because bronze, in physics, bronze has a tensile strength that marble does not, right? This is why we put metal reinforcements in buildings, right? Because metal can take this or something stone cannot. But directly translates the pose of the spear bearer into a totally different context. That shows just how important and how popular this was. This statue is from the Capitol Art Museum, and it shows another of Polyclitus' figurophytes. The spear bearer was used particularly for that treatise, right? It relates directly back to his teaching manual. But he used the contrapposto pose in other statues that were equally widely copied, right? Borrowed everywhere. And so the diadoumenos type is this one where the arms are raised above the head, even though the torso from the shoulders down more or less follows the exact spear bearer type. Now, both of these figures are intended to be athletes. Thus, the spear bearer is not a warrior, but a javelin thrower. He's an athlete, right? And the diadoumenos figure is a figure who actually, in some of the versions, is tying a victory ribbon around his head. In this particular copy, that has been manipulated into something else. But the original by Polyclitus had him, right, victory ribbon tied in his head. And our inventive Roman copyists from the Capitol line have turned that into something slightly different. Right? So it's a widely used and multi-application pose that Polyclitus uses again and again and again. Up at the Walters in Baltimore, there is a broken torso of this particular type as well. And you can see that we notice that type for a couple of reasons. The hip shot gets a little bit heavier. You know, the way the hip kicks out to the side, right? Becomes a little bit more dramatic in these. And you can tell from the way the shoulders have been raised in this broken torso in Baltimore that, in fact, those arms were up rather than down, just from the way this line here is treated. Right? I think that's a good place to stop. I've got two more Polyclitus figures to show you, but I don't want to keep us too much longer. You guys have been very patient tonight through everything. We will wrap up next week. We will wrap up classical Greek art and get into Hellenistic. I will do what I did before, which is if we've got a work that you were supposed to talk about in Rome and didn't get the chance to, I'll email you that you're coming up. Okay? Right. So that you're not caught unawares at the end of class. Remember that if you want to go to International Week, talk to one of our international dinners, talk to one of our international students about getting a $10 ticket. If you want to go to Philadelphia on the 16th, email me and I'll put you on the list. And remember that tomorrow is the contest deadline for the photo narrative, which has a $200 top prize. That seems like a nice little thing. Yes? We were the biggest class that went abroad.